The VLOOKUP is a logical function. It's used to look up or search for a value in a table of data and return an associated value. For example, you may want to look up a product number in a table in order to find the associated price of that product, and you want to display that associated price. Let's look at this example of grades. What we're going to do when we're going to look at the VLOOKUP, we're going to look at the average for each student and search for it in this table of data here. We'll search for it in the first column and we'll find the closest match to that average. So the closest match to that 86.33 is here. So we will look up the associated value in the second column, which is B, and then that will be the value that will be returned or displayed in column F. I wanted to point out the difference between the VLOOKUP and the HLOOKUP. The VLOOKUP is a vertical lookup and the HLOOKUP is a horizontal lookup. They can be used for the same purpose. The only difference is how you determine to set up the data table or the table array that holds the values that you will search for and return. For the VLOOKUP, since it's vertical, those values for the table array will be in sets of columns. In the HLOOKUP, the data will be in rows. To point out, when you set up the data, the first column or the first row must be the column that holds the value where you will search for that value. For example, for the 86.33 average, it will search for that average in the first column or the first row. So those searchable values must be in that first column or row. Subsequent columns will hold the other data that you need. One of those subsequent columns, in this case the second column or the second row, will hold the data value that you would like to return or display. Let's go into the VLOOKUP function. There are 4 items that you need to determine and enter here for the VLOOKUP. The lookup value is what do you want to look up in the table. The table array is where you need to find that data and the value that you'll return. The column index number is a number. It is not a cell reference. It's the number of the column that holds the related or associated data that you want to return. The range lookup is either going to be a value of true or false, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay, in this example, we've got a lookup value. What we want to look up is the average for the first student. The table array, again, is where you need to find that value for the average, and it also includes the value that you want to return, that associated value. So not only does it need to include this, where you search for the average, it also needs to include this so that it can pull the associated grade to display. So your table array is here. And as a note, your table array is viewed as a separate table in Excel. It looks at this data separately from all of the other data in the spreadsheet. It looks at this as being column 1 of the table array, and this is column 2 of the table array. So that leads us to the column index number. Again, that is a number, it is not a cell reference. It's the number of the column which holds the related or associated data that you want to return. In this case, we'll find the average here, the closest match, and then we'll go to the second column to find the associated value to return or display here. In this case, we have column 1 and column 2. Column 2 holds the data that we would like to return to display in column F. In this case, we'll just put the number 2 for the second column here. The range lookup is either true or false. If you do not put anything here, it will assume that your value is true. The true, if you need to enter the range lookup is either true or false. If you do not enter anything here, it assumes that you enter true. If you are finding an exact match for your data, you'll enter false. Now what that means is if I'm searching for the average and I have all of these exact numbers in my data table, I can use false here in the range lookup because I'm finding an exact match. For example, if I have those product numbers in a column and I'm looking up the exact product number here in order to find the associated price in the next column, in that case, I will find the exact product number in the table, so I could use false. In this case, our averages, we cannot possibly have every permutation of our averages from 1 to 100 with the decimal places in a data table. So we use the range of numbers. In that case, we want to find the closest match. For example, the 86.33, the closest match is going to be 85, which is a B. In this case, we will go ahead and enter true. Again, if you do not enter that, it's going to assume that it's true. Notice that the first return is B, and that looks correct. Now, before I copy this down, I am going to make these absolute so that that table array stays the same as far as the references, stays the same as we copy it down. This doesn't need to be absolute because we want that cell reference to change for each student as we copy it down. And you can see as we copy it, I always double check a couple to see if everything looks correct. And in this case, from what I can see, everything looks correct with the VLOOKUP.